Welcome to Our Last Meal, the podcast on grief, loss, and food. I'm your host, Andrew. Every episode, I talk with a guest about someone important in their life, someone they've lost, and what role food played in the relationship. This week, I'm talking with Jordyn, co-host of the podcast Tricky Existence. I'm just going to go and call out here in the intro. I'm going to try to make myself a little more vulnerable than I guess maybe I normally do. Every week or every other week, I invite somebody on and we talk about loss, talk about grief. And in the first episode, I shared more about myself and losing my grandfather. I also talked about my grandmother and called out that she wasn't in good health. Yesterday, December the 26th, at 4:34 a.m. at 90 years old, my grandmother passed away. And if I sound off in this conversation, or if you hear me alluding to my grieving process, that's why. It still hurts. It's still very raw. It's taking everything I can to hold it together just to record this one piece right now. And I am going to share more about her in the future when I feel a little more ready. Just wanted to call that out up top. And I miss her. And I'm really glad I got to talk to Jordyn. It was very therapeutic in some ways to do that. I hope listening to it will be helpful to you. So, content warning as we get in. Obviously, the show does talk about death, so please be mindful as you listen. And thank you for being here. Hello and welcome to Our Last Meal. I'm your host, Andrew, and my guest this week is Jordyn, co-host of Tricky Existence, a podcast that focuses on mental health through learning, unlearning, and healing. Jordyn, thank you for joining me today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this conversation.
I am too, and it's funny. People, whenever they come on the show, I hear that a lot. Like, I'm excited to talk about this, and I don't know that this is an exciting topic typically.
Yeah,
But
right.
I do think it's an important topic, and it is I think it's something that everybody is going to experience at some point. Different kinds of grief and loss, but I think it is one of the most common things that you can think of that we go through and we don't talk about.
Yeah.
So
I think that's why it's exciting, is because grief is such an isolating process that to have outlets is just, and to like be seen in your grief is just such a relief and such a good feeling, that to have spaces in the world where that's acceptable is like like a sigh almost.
yeah. Well, and you're right. I mean, there's and I mentioned to you briefly. I'm literally in the midst of it right now. It feels like an otherness. I've tried explaining this to somebody before, that when you're grieving, when you've lost someone, it almost feels like you've got a stain on you or a stink on you, and it's I don't know how if you've ever felt this, but just you've got this feeling of other people can sense it and it's off-putting.
Mm. Yeah, I think that I have ran into just the almost going against the societal norms is where I'm finding my discomfort, where I'm putting pressure on myself and externally experiencing pressure of like going on like it's normal to not burden others or to not make others uncomfortable or whatever that feeling is in the moment. And so I'm almost trying to like numb and suppress my own feeling to act in accordance to whatever the pressures, the norms. And it's very othering because you're not being true to your experience.
Yeah.
And it's just like it's this weird sensation in my body when I am experiencing like heat of the moment grief.
Yeah. So that otherness though that you talk about, and trying to be true to yourself, do you think that that's only for grief? I know your podcast talks about mental health. I mean, do you think it's for other things that
Mm.
we, not you specifically, but we as humans experience?
Yeah, yeah. No, I think grief is very unique in its othering, but I do think that feeling outside and alone in your thoughts and experiences and feelings is a common experience. And that's really the big mission of Tricky Existence is my co-host and I share really our innermost thoughts just in hopes that it reaches somebody else and they feel less alone, because we like to say in the social work world or just mental health world that shame dies in safe places where stories are told. So
Hmm.
we really believe in that. So we kind of create this environment to share those stories so that you kind of have that epiphany moment listening where you're like, oh my gosh, like I'm not weird. I'm not alone in this. I'm not bad or wrong or whatever the negative thing that you've labeled yourself with is.
That's beautiful. I love that that quote about shame as well. And I have to say too, I feel like social work is really truly one of the only, or one of the few altruistic things that a person can do. And I say that just because I've heard stories from social workers and from people who do the job and have really been on the front lines, and I just, for the life of me, I I don't have words. It's just, I'm sure that the things that you see, the things you experience, I mean, the mental toll that can take, it really feels like a selfless thing to do, and to, choose as a career to say, I'm gonna do this to try to help others. And then that you take that even a step further, the podcast, I mean, it sounds like it's part therapeutic for yourself, but it also sounds like it's also very much, if I can kind of bear all and that helps someone else, I think that's a really noble cause.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, my co-host Pearl is still in social work. I stepped out of social work about a year ago, and this podcast is kind of treating that passion that I have for it, for social justice and mental health. Um, and it totally is selfless and noble. And I have found, like all things in this world, it is very corrupt as well. So
Yeah.
you have to find the balance, and yeah, and you really have to have a strong personal, moral, and ethical compass to navigate through the field and professional work of social work to kind of stay true to your original motive, I think.
And see, that makes sense to me. It kind of goes into the thought I've always had too, that this doesn't seem like a field that is easy to stay in for a long period of
Mm,
time.
yes. Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting. I loved my education and my time in social work, and I very much feel like I still practice a lot of it in my personal life. So yeah, it's an interesting field for sure.
I can imagine. But would you say too that the podcast now, it seems like it kind of scratches the itch that you have to put that positive out there?
Yeah, yeah, it feels very freeing to do it in a way that feels true to the rapid pace of mental health and social justice. Um, and I think that that is a piece that I was missing when I was working in the professional field of social work. Whereas new things are coming out every day, my ideas and the way that I see the world changes every day, and I get to really, um, along with Pearl, who shares a lot of my values and a lot of our outlook on life, just really get to create and be true to like how we're feeling in the moment, and like we were talking about in the process of grief, just be very true to wherever we're at in the moment and have learning and change be okay. And I think that that has helped me feel more embodied in just my own mental health, and if it touches someone along the way, then that is more than we could ask for.
That I love that. That's I've told people before that one of the things I enjoy the most about doing a podcast is the freedom. You know, if you're hosting your own podcast, you have the freedom to do what feels right.
Mhm.
And you know, it sounds like for you, you've got a co-host, a friend who, you know, sharing the same morals is absolutely just amazing. That you know, you've
Yeah.
got somebody who, you know, you see eye to eye, and that you've got that freedom to be authentic in who you are and have an open conversation. I mean, it's incredible.
Yeah. Yeah, and just as I always leave this detail out of my memories. I think because like we're talking about like when you're in that initial state of grief, nothing makes sense. But Pearl,
Yeah.
my co-host and one of my best friends, is actually the person who drove hours and hours across winter in Iowa to come to my grandma's funeral when she died, and that is just such a small example, but a true testament to the friendship that we have. So,
Yeah.
yeah, it's just really. I'll be editing an episode, or Pro will be, and we'll like text each other and be like, "Oh my gosh, we're such good friends! Like we're so everybody should look up to us." Like we just like hype ourselves up. It's so funny, but it feels so true.
That's great though. You know, I think that's the mark of a true friend is one that can gas you up, as well as the one who can call you out and
Yeah.
humble you.
Yes.
But that person
100%.
who can, yeah, that person who can just bring you, up to a 12 when you need it.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah. And
can't
you'll
beat
hear
that.
both. You hear us gas each other up and you hear us humble each other real quick in these episodes. So yeah.
Oh. Well, you know, you kind of alluded to it. You know, the topic of the podcast is grief, grief and food. You know, because
Hmm.
you know why should we talk about food whenever we're talking about people we've lost? Um, I always feel like there's a really close connection, and I've talked on the show before about connections I have to food and to people. Um, you know, and so whenever we talked about you coming on the show, I'll let you introduce who you wanted to speak about today as it relates to grief and to food.
Yeah, yeah. So I lost my grandma Sherry. I mean, what have the last few years been? But it was in 2019 that I lost my grandma Sherry, and our big focus of food was baking. We would bake so much all the time. I mean, like whenever I talk about my grandma, I almost like get transported back to her kitchen in her farmhouse. So we would bake a lot, and they really let me, my aunt and my grandma really let me have a lot of creative freedom from very, very young. And so they had like a craft room that extended to, but even in the kitchen. So I remember that one of their favorite stories to tell is how I was a young kid and we were baking lasagna for some reason, and they let me put like rainbow fish sprinkles in this lasagna for whatever reason, and I think we like served it to a dinner party, but they just really let me have a lot of creative freedom that I feel is like so just like such a foundational thing for who I am today. Um, but the memory I shared is probably with you earlier is probably one of my favorite memories that I have. My grandma would make pancakes from scratch. And so whenever we would have sleepovers, my siblings and I would have sleepovers out at the farm, every morning we would wake up to the sound of her like making her pancakes from scratch, but she would put them on the grill in the weirdest shapes ever, like truly just like flicking her wrist one way or another, like there was no rhyme or reason. And when she would serve the pancakes, we would all talk about and everybody would weigh in what animal shape it was. And we were like eating a zoo, and it was like just the most magical thing to like not be served a circle pancake for whatever reason and just be able to like have this point of connection where we were all just like kind of leaning into the silliness and like the lightness of life, and it was just
Yeah.
a simple pancake.
You know, I love that though, and you know, you kind of mentioned that, you know, not sure why we thought it was so much fun. Kids, and I have a daughter who's 6,
Mm,
and one of the things I've learned from her, and this is going to sound really cliche, but you hear parents talk about how, oh, I've learned so much from them, or you
mhm,
hear teachers that talk about how much you really do. I mean, I think what it is, kids find fun in the most random places,
mhm,
and it, you know, you could look at it that hey, they're easily entertained, or you could look at it as you know, children, I feel like they are always out to see, okay, where's the fun in this? Where's the excitement?
mhm,
So the idea of, you know, these pancakes being something that, hey, it might seem silly to an outsider, you know, but
mhm.
to me it sounds fun. And so how much, you know, how much did she enjoy it as well?
Right. Yeah. I think as you're and you talk about your daughter, I just think I nannied a lot in the past and I still nanny on the weekends a lot. Um, and I just think about how kids don't know the rules that you're supposed to follow yet, right? So
Yeah.
I think about how like the rule of pancakes, as funny as this is gonna sound, is that like they have to be circles and like that's how they bake the best and that's how whatever is behind that. But my grandma is someone who just never really subscribed to the rules of like of whatever it was. Like she just made her own way. And so I am sure that the first animal pancake had been an accident and I one of us must have just made it into like, oh, it's an animal pancake, like it's not a mistake, like we're just going with it, and it turned into this thing. But that's just who my grandma was. She just like marched to the beat of her own drum and like always took me seriously, even like just really truly always took my thoughts and ideas seriously. So I think that it was just who she was. And yeah, it's just something as simple as these silly pancakes, just so symbolic of our relationship and who she was as a person.
I'm gonna circle, there's a couple things I'm gonna circle back to. Um because I love that story. The first one is her taking you serious even as a child. I love that because I mean, you talk about how, you know, children don't know the rules, and I think we beat a lot of creativity out of them over the years and through, you know, repeating that, not literally, by the way. But you know, through like, oh, these are the rules, you can't do this for this reason, you have to do this for this reason, we take a lot of that joy and creativity away from them, a lot of that spark. But it sounds like she was trying to encourage it, and also just treating a child, you know, like an actual person, you know,
Mhm.
who is trying to learn who they are and what all of this is. But how much of an impact would you say that that had on you? That just that, even at a young age, knowing that, okay, this adult looks at me as a person,
Mhm.
not as just almost a pet or a just a thing that's here.
Yeah. Yeah, there's the question in psychology of like nature versus nurture, and I don't think that it's a question of like one over the other. I think both are so just intimately woven into who we are as people. But I think by nature, I was born as somebody with a very strong sense of self. And as a little girl, especially a little girl in a rural Iowa town, um, that was not necessarily acceptable, or there were just a lot more barriers to face, to just like have a supportive, like what you said, we just kind of there's a lot of feedback that kids get instead of a lot of like acceptance. And so I think as a strong-willed little girl, that challenged a lot of people and challenged a lot of people's ideas of maybe how society should run. Um, but yeah, being out at the farm, which is what we called my grandparents lived on a farm. It's very much what what it is. But yeah, being out at the farm, um, I just got to be maybe a little bit too much. Like, I just got to be myself. Like, I just got to kind of do what I wanted to do, and I didn't really get in a lot of trouble. I wasn't really, in my opinion, a naughty kid by most family. But yeah, I think it created this outlet where I wasn't getting conflicting feedback, and it really just nurtured this like confidence and I think this boldness that I had by nature, but that nurture part of it really allowed it to flourish and um, just create this foundation for this confidence that I carry even with me today.
I'm glad you brought up the nature versus nurture. I won't lie and say that I've studied this. I haven't. But I think everyone's heard of this, and we've all heard case studies that prove one or the other.
Hmm.
But I think your thought process there of it being kind of a combination is what it sounds like. I mean, I think there are some things that are innate to who we are as individuals, but there, certain environments I think can work with that to bring out the best or the worst in some cases. Um, I love that you had that experience though, and it sounds like it was really special.
Yeah.
Um, I'll kind of go back through a few things here. So you mentioned the animal pancakes and how it probably started as a mistake, but all the kids loved it. But you also said you nanny. Do you ever get a chance? Have you had a chance to make animal pancakes for anyone else, be it kids,
I
friends?
think I'm scared. I don't, like as simple as it sounds, I still don't know how she did it. Like these shapes were crazy.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I've made like colored pancakes like with food dye, which I probably wouldn't do today after learning about food dye, but like I have in the past, but no, I've never made the animal pancakes. I think I'm nervous. I think I'm too nervous to mess it up maybe.
I I get it. There is something, I don't know what it is. Grandmothers just have this ability to make something
Yes.
and you can't recreate it.
No.
The big dish for me that I want to learn to make that my grandmother made was her hoe cakes or her fried cornbread.
Mhm.
That I was talking to my sister yesterday about dishes that she made growing up, and my sister, her favorite was chicken and rice that my grandmother would make. And it's simple, and it was mainly just seasoned with salt and pepper. And I know that it sounds so simple. My sister, she knows how to make it. She says that she's made it for her kids, and her daughters love it. And she, not sure if you just heard a loud crash. I just had some stuff fall in my office. But she's made this for her kids, and they love it, but it's not quite the same. And it's weird because for them it's what they know and they love it, but for my sister, she knows it's a little bit different. I've tried the hoe cakes before and I can't get them just right, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna keep working at it.
I know. And maybe that's why. Like I know. And maybe I don't need it to be the exact same as my grandma's, but I don't think I'm ready to like get new information into that memory.
I wonder this, and I'd love to hear your opinion. Do you think, because I know that we know we're not the only ones who do this, who try to make something that somebody made. Are
Mhm.
we chasing a flavor, a taste, or are we chasing a memory?
Right. I know. I think about that with like food that I've had on a vacation or like even a restaurant that like you order the same meal again, it never tastes the same as the first time. So I feel like you're chasing the memory, but like your memory is clouded by the emotion that you felt in that moment too.
Yeah, because I,
Yeah.
w- I I would love to eat my grandmother's fried cornbread, but I would really much rather be eating it while sitting at her kitchen table
Yeah. Right.
and being a kid again. I think that's what I really want.
Mhm. Yeah.
And
Yeah. It's so interesting.
yeah, I will say the pancakes. Make them for some friends sometime.
Yeah.
it may not make sense. They may not even like them. The main the main thing is if you can sit there and say, "Hey, tastes good to me." That's what matters truly.
Yeah. Yeah, I am. My little sister was the one who stayed out at the farm with me the most, and we've talked about him and talked about him and talked about him. We'll have to just make him sometime.
Yeah, the older I get, and the more I do this podcast, the more I realize how important it is to get recipes from
Mhm.
people. I My mom probably thought I was crazy, but a few weeks ago I called her and said, "Hey, I'm gonna hang up. I want you to call me back. I'm gonna decline it. I want you to leave me a voicemail. Give me the recipe to your chicken and dumplings."
Yeah, I
And
love that. Yeah. We my aunt used to be my Girl Scout leader when I was a kid, and we did a cookbook sale one year. So a lot of my grandma's recipes are in there, along with the recipes of the grandparents of the other girls who were in the troop. So I still have that, and it's just yeah, that is like one of the most meaningful things that I own.
yeah, well, it's because there's something about heirlooms, I think, and this is it's there's something so I think precious about being able to hold something that a loved one held. But you think about something like a cookbook. I mean, you can go and take. It's almost like she's speaking to you. It's almost like
Hmm.
she's talking with you and telling you, "Okay, now do this, now do this." You can make a thing, and it's the thing that she would make, and it's one of the things. One of my aunts, I'm gonna ask to see if we have any of my grandmother's old cookbooks for that same reason. I would love to have, just something just to. I want to recreate some of what she made. I would
Hmm.
love to do that.
Yeah, yeah.
Um,
It's so funny because when you were like, just get your friends together and make the pancakes, I'm like, no, they don't deserve the pancakes. I'm like gatekeeping my animal pancakes. I'm like, I will make those with my siblings and no one else. It's like, yeah, I just was like, why would I ever let anybody else in that memory?
I can understand that. And let me backtrack. I'll backtrack. So maybe not make them for your friends, but make them for yourself.
Yeah, yeah.
Make them for yourself. I'm a big fan of Brenner. So I think it's a Tuesday night pancake sounds amazing. I know that I'm not in a position to tell you what to have for dinner, but I'm gonna vote that you have animal pancakes for dinner.
Yeah, I should. I should call my aunt after this and ask if, cause she made it from scratch. And I'm like, I don't. It can't be that hard, but I also have no idea how she did it. Like they were just ready when I woke up. It was like, okay.
Did you before you came on the show, did you talk with any of your family about her to kind of jog your memory? I know some people do, some people don't.
No, I didn't. We talk about her pretty frequently. My aunt and I do for sure. And like what you were saying about like when you're making something, it's like your loved one is right there with you. My grandma and I have this relationship where like almost like a shorthand, I guess. And I still feel her very, very, very present, like very consistently. And so it almost was like I was like checking in with her, and I was like I don't know, just like she was more on my mind lately, and kind of like having more, just I don't know, of this. I don't know what the right word is for it, but I just very much feel my grandma's presence, just like day to day, but also like a lot of times in my dreams. So just like being like, "Well, grandma, like I won't say anything you don't want me to say, but you gotta let me know what you don't want me to say." But yeah.
That's beautiful though. Um, just that feeling that even if we lose somebody, they can still be there with us, and
Hmm.
it's
Yeah,
beautiful.
I haven't I have lost quite a few grandparents, but I have never just felt like the almost like the guardian angel experience as strongly as I have since she died.
Yeah, it is. There is something really comforting though about knowing that somebody is, I don't know, still with you, still inside of you, and it's one of the. I guess I'm agnostic on my best day.
Hmm.
But that feeling that hey, that they've left an impression on you. I know that that's a real thing.
Yeah.
and I know that that feeling of love and just family, I guess that's a real thing.
Mhm.
Now, I was also going to ask, you said that whenever you think of her, you think of food,
Mhm.
and can you tell me more about that? Is it just the pancakes? Are there other foods? Is it you mentioned that you talk to your aunt a lot, and that you still talk about your grandmother quite a bit. Is
Mhm.
food a topic that comes up often when you speak of her?
Yeah, I think when I am like sitting and thinking about her myself, she just truly was always in her kitchen. And so um, I think that it's just kind of that like sensory correlation where I like when I have a visual memory of her, a lot of the times it's like I'm sitting across the counter and she's in her kitchen either cooking, or she had so many cats. So she was like preparing her, who knows, her like special cat food that is like half like old ingredients and like half the cheapest cat food she could find, because she has like truly, I'm not exaggerating, like 50 farm cats, and she just could never say no to any strays that would come around. So like she was either in the kitchen taking care of her cats or taking care of like her family, or would be cleaning up and we would be like chatting across the island, or we would be having like birthday parties or Christmas dinners or Easter dinners or whatever. Um, and so there's just a lot of memories of her like caring for others through food, but also just like remembering the conversations that we would have, like sitting across the kitchen counter, and just like her quick wit and her like borderline snarky comments. Not even snarky like towards anyone, but just like telling it how she thought it was. And just, yeah. So, my aunt and I joke a lot about her humor and just like how bold she was, and um just, yeah, like we just tease her a lot in our own conversations. She's kind of a pack rat, like I think a lot of people from that generation are, out of like scarcity mindset. But
Yeah.
yeah, just her food, her personality, we just kind of tease her. And then my aunt and I share very similar beliefs about just like how like spirits or people or characteristics just kind of stick around. So we'll kind of be like, well, yeah, like grandma was around today, and like
Yeah.
I know she had an opinion.
So I guess there are certain things that I get. Maybe are there things that you see or just things that happen that make you think of her and like think like, okay, she's with me. She's giving me her input.
Yeah, yeah. It's really just this feeling, I think, or like I'll have this like moment of like clarifying intuition, and like I definitely think that that is my own intuition, but I'll be like, I think like my like angels or spirits or whatever you want to call them are definitely like pushing this message forward during the time that I need it. I remember I think the first time I really felt it, I was having like truly the worst day at work ever.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm not really a crier, but for whatever reason, like I just remember I wanted to cry so bad at work. It was just horrible. Um, and like all of a sudden I was like sitting next to the window at work, and like the Crows song was like just glaringly loud, and I was like, look, I like looked out the window and a crow was like way too close for comfort, and I was like, what is going on? Like crows are like one of the like crows do not like being in close proximity to human
Yeah.
beings. And I'm like, what is going on? And it was just like this feeling where like I was like, there's gotta be something like spiritual going on. And it just very much felt like my grandma was like, you're good. Like, you know yourself, like, you know your values, like, you always, like, you know how to get yourself out of situations you don't want to be in, like, you know how to, like, get through hard stuff. And it just was like this moment of like, okay, like, there's people looking out for me. Like, there's angels looking out for me. Like, I got this. And so, um, my friends tease me and they're like, "You think your grandma's a crow?" And it's not that I think my grandma is a crow. My grandma had a crow. My grandma had a crow in a cage for like 20 years.
Okay,
And
see.
it's not like I think my grandma is reincarnated as a crow. It's just that like when people pass on, they use like messages that you will pick up on from your relationship with them to just be like, you're good, like you, I got
Yeah.
you, like you're here. So I'm people after this podcast, people are gonna be like, this girl needs to be medicated.
Well, I'm just gonna say, as the host of this podcast, I'm gonna go ahead and just say no. I don't think so. I think, and I don't think that it was a reincarnation. To me, it sounds like it was a special woman who left an imprint on you, who and knew that you needed that day.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I tend towards that's that's one of those things that's there are just certain times where you just kind of need a little nudge, and it's great to know that you've got that person who cared about you then and clearly still cares about you now.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if I like if I would embrace grief as much as I have if I didn't have like the belief system that I do, that people can still send messages from the great beyond.
Yeah. I guess I told you I go back and forth on where I stand, and I think the main thing to me is and I've told people this before, but I feel like I don't think there's a right or a wrong way to grieve. There are healthier ways than others,
Yeah.
but I think if something helps you and helps you to if it helps you and it gets you through, and it can bring a smile to your face on a day that you clearly you need it, you're
Mhm.
having that rough day. That's I mean, I you can't tell me that that's not true. I mean, you can't tell me that there's something wrong with that. I guess all I'm saying, I'm rambling, but full support from my end.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really is sourced in kind of those characteristics and those attributes that you notice when you're around those people. And I think that those obviously stay with you. And so if all it takes is a reminder to bring out those strengths, then I think that that's them still being around too.
See, and I agree. I think I don't know. This is where I would say I think some people get too far up their own ass and won't let other people, you know, have what they need, and I don't think that's right.
Yeah.
You know, I think to me that's the way that's beautiful.
Thank you.
One other thing I did want to ask about too, you talked about creativity and how them, your grandmother, and I think you said your aunt, who they let you add the sprinkles to the was it to lasagna,
Yeah. Yeah.
that they let you do that, and just things like that you feel like it helped instill that strong sense of creativity in you from a young age. How has that held on to you, and how has that helped you move you forward in life?
Mm, yeah. Yeah. If I'm remembering correctly, the fish sprinkles came from the need for like the recipe called for sugar, and I had learned that sprinkles were just sugar, and I was like, I was like, they're rainbow fish sprinkles. Who doesn't want to add this to every single meal that's ever like? I was looking for any chance I could to get fish sprinkles in front of me. Um, so I think just
That's
that.
creative problem solving.
Yeah, exactly. I think just that, like, well, first of all, just like the ability to even be able to like ask that and know that I wasn't gonna be like treated as stupid or like laughed at or whatever. So I think that that definitely is still with me today. And my grandpa on my mom's side also had this saying where he was like there's basically there's no dumb question because if you never ask, you'll never know.
Yeah,
And I think those two things, not even I think, I know for a fact, like I am someone who believes like I never want to be the person to tell myself no, so I'm always going to ask, and like if the answer is no, somebody else is going to have to tell me no. I'm never going to not ask the question. Um and I totally like that is the thread line there is that experience with my in that environment at the farm where I there was no dumb question. Like my ideas were always taken seriously. um, I think that it sticks with me in the face of a lot of challenges, whether that is like for a really long time and even now still, just like not being taken seriously because of like being young or appearing young, but having like very like big, bold adult quote adult ideas. There's some adults out there who are very immature, but that's
agreed.
a whole other podcast episode, I think. But yeah, just this idea like this. I've never really operated on fear because I have always just had this deep rooted belief that like I'm capable, and even if I don't succeed in the way that I planned that I would, like success can show up in different ways. And I just attribute that so much to being in an environment where like I got to create in the way that I wanted to create and follow it through. And if my idea didn't work, be allowed the room to fail and kind of pivot with an idea or a project. Um, and then I think the other big thing that goes into that is just like they enjoyed being around me. Like they enjoyed
Yeah,
my personality. They enjoyed what I had to say. They enjoyed like they just like liked having me around. And I know that that sounds so simple, but like to this day having friends who just truly enjoy being around me is one of the most healing experiences. um
yeah.
so yeah, there's a lot of things that came out of that creativity and just the encouraged autonomy of who I was and what I thought.
I will say the idea of like that may be a simple thing, just that people that desire your presence. I mean, but I strongly feel like some of the best things in life are some of the simplest.
Yeah.
So, something being simple, I don't think is bad. I
Hmm.
think about some of my favorite foods, or you think about most comfort foods are typically simple foods. You think about, a good day could just be a simple day of, I
Hmm.
woke up, it was raining outside, and so I watched Netflix, or I read a book, or I got to clean my house. Simple things can be really rewarding and really just reaffirming
Hmm.
sometimes.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's exactly what it was. Just affirming of who I was and who I am, and like as a kid, you just like you mentioned earlier, you're just trying to figure out who you are, and to be affirmed in that, I think is pretty substantial to like the foundation that you build of your sense of self.
Yeah, I love that. So before I go into the last part of the interview, I just want to ask, was there anything else you wanted to share about your grandmother? Anything else that stood out as, you know, this was a special thing about this
Mm.
person? I ask this because, I want this podcast to serve as a chance to just honor those people that meant the most to us.
Yeah, yeah. I think one more big thing that like my grandmother influenced, but one thing that I just really loved about my grandma was just like her sense of adventure and her sense of adventure um opposing maybe what she should have been doing at the time. She shared a lot of stories about how she went out to Washington, D.C. and worked for the White House for a while before she came home and got married and had babies.
Oh,
And
wow.
she shared an apartment with now I forget how many other women, but just shared like those fun stories of like this home that she created with her friends, and um, shared those a lot throughout my childhood. And then I shared my grandma had dementia, and like that was the time period that she thought that she was in for the last few years of her life. So I know
Yeah.
that it was like significant to her. um, but just this idea that this woman who was like born a few generations before me in a time where like you were, especially in Iowa, where you were supposed to graduate school, maybe not even graduate school, but get married
Yeah.
and have babies and be a housewife, that she went and had this adventure, and how proud she was of it, and how she just went and did it and had all these crazy stories. Not that I'm even sure that all of them were true, but maybe the spirit of the story was.
You know what? I think it's even better if some of them are a little bit
Yeah,
fabricated.
yes, right, exactly. So yeah, just that she went and did that and shared that, and um, yeah, and raised a daughter and raised a couple grandkids to have the same belief system.
That's incredible. She sounds like she was an incredible woman.
Yes, she really was.
So the final question I have to ask you: if you could have one more meal with her,
Mm.
chance to sit down and have one more meal, what would it be?
Oh man. You know, she's gonna really hate that I say this, but as I've grown up and moved out of Iowa and been introduced to like spices that aren't salt and pepper, I don't know that I could go back and have one of her meals. I really don't. But I would for sure have 100% have her animal pancakes, and probably her angel food cake. That would definitely be a necessity. But I think that we would need to maybe troubleshoot and compromise on some of the main 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 courses.
You know, maybe you'd be able to introduce her to something you love now.
She probably wouldn't like it. she she liked things her way.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Well, Jordyn, I appreciate so much you being on. Here at the end, I do want to give you time to, to talk about your podcast and tell us more about it.
Oh yeah, yeah. I think one last thing to say around grief is just that I hope somebody has brought this up to you before, but out of all of the things that people say after you lose someone, the thing that actually touched me and brought me like back into my present body was just asking what the person I lost was like. Just
Yeah.
that simple taking a minute to hear about the character of the person that is now missing in my life has been the only thing that has been meaningful to me when I am in the grieving process. So I forgot about that. Wanted to make sure I mentioned it.
I appreciate you mentioning that. And I appreciate you sharing with us about her.
Yeah, yeah. Thank you for making space for that. But Tricky Existence is, just like Andrew said, a podcast where we, Pearl and I, my co host, honestly share some things that probably should not be on the internet, but we do so in hopes that you are sitting at home or going about your daily life, and you can hear that like the things that you judge yourself for in your head are not actually that off basis, so that you can be alleviated of some shame. And we believe that once you are into a greater self awareness, you have more control over um, kind of the actions and behaviors and interactions that you have with others. So, yeah, we really just, it's honestly kind of like you're listening into our FaceTimes with each other. And like we try and sometimes succeed to bring in some of our educational background. I have a bachelor's in social work. Pearl has a master's in social work and a sex educator certificate. So we do bring in some peer-reviewed sources sometimes, but most of the time, it's just us trying to navigate our way through life and our thoughts and ideas in what they would say is a safe container. So, yeah, join us over there. We would love to have more listeners just so that we can kind of get more ideas. We don't think that we're right. We know we're not right a lot of the time. But yeah, we're just kind of creating this community where you can explore your thoughts without judging yourself.
I love that. Yeah, the last several years have been very eye opening to me in terms of mental health and the importance and having conversations that we don't normally have. And that was a big motivator for this podcast. And
Yeah.
to know that there are other people out there doing, in that same space, trying to have honest conversation and encourage others to do the same thing. I I love it and I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Jordyn. I appreciate so much being on. That's a tricky existence. I
Mm-hmm.
will link to all the socials and to the website in the show notes. But I encourage everyone, please go check that out. And um, thank you for being on.
Thank you.
Thank you to Jordyn for joining me today. I really enjoyed this chat so much, and honestly, I think I needed it. And to Jordyn, I am forever grateful for talking with me today. We spoke a little bit before we started recording. She was kind enough to offer to reschedule, but I thought maybe it'd be helpful. And hey, maybe it was a little bit of serendipity, but um, hearing her talk as somebody who's a few years past it was helpful for me. So I am appreciative. I do want to encourage you to check out Tricky Existence. I am personally of the opinion that there is so much need to focus on and talk about mental health. And I'm glad that people like her and Pearl are being open and vulnerable and encouraging others to talk about it. So you can find them on Instagram at Tricky Existence or go to trickyexistence.com. I will link both of those in the show notes. You also can subscribe to Our Last Meal wherever you're listening. I would, I normally ask this. I'll do it again. Take the time to rate and review so that other people can find the podcast. I'd love for other people to hear about this because I think it can be helpful for people that are grieving and going through loss. And I want to normalize talking about that and trying to process it. I'd also love it if you'd follow Our Last Meal on Twitter and Instagram at Our Last Meal Pod. You can also visit at ourlastmeal.com. If you're ever interested in being a guest on the podcast, you can reach out by clicking on the Share Your Story button at the top of the page. Until next time, take care of yourselves and share a meal with someone you care about.
You're listening to Tricky Existence, the podcast where we talk shit about our lives so you can feel better about yours. I'm Pearl.
And I'm Jordyn. But for real, we hope when you show up to this podcast and listening and learning with us, your shame can feel a little lighter and you can get to know yourself deeper.
We always aim to provide a space for learning, unlearning, and healing together. That's really what our 5 years of friendship is based on, examining who we are and who we wish to be. And we welcome you to join us in that journey.
We're talking social justice, mental health, sex, relationships, and all the stuff we are navigating in real time. We won't always get it right, but one thing you can count on is that you're going to see us grow with you too.
So follow us and listen for celebrations, uncomfortable conversations, and probably some awkward stories.
Pearl, you know what?
What?
I'm a slut for some good followers.
Me too. So join us for some reclaiming and reparations.
Good job. You nailed it.
Dang, nailed it. Crushed it.
Doop, doop.
And that's how you do a trailer.
Yeah.